Welcome back to the REW Audio community. My name is John, and for this video we will begin our room calibration journey very simply just using Room Equalization Wizard and finding out what the current characteristics of the speakers and subwoofers we have. If you've been following this channel, we recently acquired two Rythmik Audio F18 subwoofers, and it's important to integrate them correctly in with the current speakers. But not just that, here's the opportunity for us to finally calibrate the speakers themselves and calibrate the subwoofers and placement of those subwoofers as we do that. But let's start very simply. Now, to get set up here, we just had to acquire, predominantly the UMIK-1 microphone. The REW software itself is free, and you download that from the internet. And if we go into the site here, we can see the downloads are available right from the Room Equalization Wizard from downloads. And you can get this for either Windows-based machines or Mac-based machines. And they also have a Linux installer. I'm going to use an existing Windows machine. Now, we also have one of the new Mac laptops. We'll probably try that at some point. But we figured we'd start with the harder to install version first. And then we know that the Mac is going to be easier as far as drivers and everything that goes into it. But the application is free. So with the UMIK microphone, now there's a UMIK-2, but the general thought is the UMIK-1 is sufficient for room equalization. Unless you're getting into speaker design, you probably don't need the UMIK-2 microphone. And there's other options like the Dayton Audio EMM6, which is calibrated. So with the software in hand and the microphone, now the microphone is a USB mic, and it comes out of the base USB-C, and I'm plugging into this laptop into the USB port, which is sufficient to power it. And instead of using the internal sound card of the laptop, now that is definitely an option and is what is advertised in the RED software, I'm using external sound card, if you will, but this is really a digital interface. And this is a USB powered, so this plugs directly into my laptop as well and acts as the sound card for the computer. And it is much better than the onboard chips. This is using Saber DACs in it and is a very good quality A to D and D to A in it. So we're using this in the setup. And to connect this to the stereo, we're connecting it to the Sony TAE9000ES. We're coming into the CD inputs through the analog. And we're taking the output. Now, there's two sets of outputs on the back of the MOTU Mark of the Unicorn M4 Digital Interface. One is a monitor, which the volume controls here affect the output. But the line output is what you want to use for this application. And to do that, you want to make sure that it's set up properly in your Windows machine. Now, to do this, what you'll want to do is first download the drivers and install the Mark of the Unicorn M4 drivers or whatever you're using for your interface. And if you're using a sound card, that's fine as well. But you want to make sure when you go into hardware and sound preferences for your laptop that you are selecting the right output. If you selected, in this case, the output 1 to 2, that would be the monitored output. We want the line output, so we're selecting that in output 3-4. When we go over to recording here, we want to make sure that the UMIK-1 is selected as our microphone, and it is. The other thing that you want to make sure that it's set to 2 channels, 24-bit, 48 kilohertz for the sound quality. So that is good. And we'll see too, as well as on the playback, we'll take a look at how our output is set up. And we got the output at 100%. And again, we're doing 2-channel, 24-bit, 48 kilohertz. So this is set up the way we want it. One thing that's interesting about the REW software is that while you install your initial version from the REW website, to get the latest updates, what you want to do is go into AV Nirvana, and to download the latest version of REW, what you're going to need to do is go into our AV Nirvana, that's www.avnirvana.com, and register and sign in. If you don't sign in with a registered user account, you won't be able to download the latest REW downloads. And you'll notice every time that you start REW that it's going to say a newer version is available. So you just can go right into this, into REW downloads, and find the particular version that you want, whether that's Windows 32-bit, 64-bit, or Mac OS or Linux. And the latest one that we have installed here is from May 9th, 2021. So that's the most current version of REW that we have installed. The next thing you'll want to do is get your calibration files for the UMIK-1. To get the calibration files for the UMIK-1, you'll want to go into the Mini DSP and select the minidsp.com website, select the UMIK-1 page, and if you scroll down a little bit down that page, you'll come to a place for the unique calibration file download, and it's asking you for the serial number. So if you bought this directly from Mini DSP, this is how it comes, and there is a serial number on the side of the box that matches your batch that came from the factory. So you put that in, you submit, and you're able to download calibrations for 2 different orientations. One is 0 degree and one is 90 degree. And we'll be using it mostly in the 90-degree fashion, so we'll definitely need that one for the setup. So with the calibration file in place, we can launch REW, and when we do, we can make sure that our preferences are set up so that the calibration files are here. So we'll go to the Calibration Files tab under Preferences, and we can see that our UMIK-1 is set up with the appropriate files for both the 0 and 90 degree orientations. The sound card, I haven't been able to find a calibration file for the MOTU M4. That would be nice to have, and then we'd have a calibration for the sound card as well. But we're using that without calibration at the moment. What we're going to do with the first measurements is find out the sound characteristics of the speaker of itself. Now, if you looked up the Polk LSI 15 specifications, Polk advertised these as a 22 to 27,000 hertz frequency response. Now, chances are it's not as level as they said it would be. They were saying that was minus 3 dB from 22 hertz to 27,000 hertz on these speakers. We're not expecting that level of performance. That's what they were rated for by Polk Audio. Let's get a sense of how far these really dip down before losing 3 dB. And then we'll have a better sense of where the subwoofers have to come in and make up for it. And we're going to be making the first measurements near field. So we're not getting any of the influence of the room. This is just what the speaker itself is capable of. Now, naturally, the room is going to affect this in perhaps a more negative than positive way. So this is probably going to be the best result in the near field situation. And then we're going to come back and take measurements from the listening position, the main listening position, and see what the difference is between the frequency responses between those two measurements. So that's going to be very telling. So we'll find out where the speaker will bottom out and need help from the subwoofers, and we'll find out what the influence of the room is with these in its current position. But again, this is hooked up to our preamplifier through the outputs of the Mark of the Unicorn digital interface to the CD input of the Sony. Now, the important thing about this is we want to go over to the Sony and first disable the subwoofer. We want to set all the speakers to large. Now, why large? We want to send the full signal to these speakers. And we want to make sure the equalization in the processor is turned off, is essentially flat, no colorization. We don't want any DSP. So we're going to put that in 2-channel mode, make sure all equalization sound modes are turned off, and make the influence of the processor as minimal as possible and make these measurements. So let's get started. What we're going to do is normalize the output level to 75 decibels, which is the level in which the REW manual suggests. So we're going to turn on our levels, and we're going to monitor those, actually using the SP, the sound pressure meter. And we're going to turn on the generator. So we're going to set this to noise, pink random, for speaker calibration. And we're going to set this to full range. And we're going to set it to -20 dBs for the calibrate level. And we're going to test this out. And that's just about 75. If I needed to adjust it, I can use my remote here for the processor until that hovered around 75. So we don't need the meter anymore. We can come now into and do a measurement. So we're going to make a measurement here, and it's going to be a SPL measurement. It's going to be a sweep from REW, and we're going to use the input microphone, the output of REW to be the output on the left speaker. So that is good. Sample rate at 48 kilohertz, and to align with the microphone setting. Keeping the levels same as we calibrated. If we do a check level here, and the levels are good, and we're doing this near field about a foot away from the tweeter, centered between the two mid-ranges. And this will be our first pass, and we'll do another near field lower to the floor to get a sense of what's radiating out of these. So there's a port on the bottom, and then there's a sub-bass radiator on the side. So we want to get another measurement down low, but let's start with the upper end here and see what we get for a frequency response. Okay, so here is what it's putting out. And I should have mentioned earlier that you should do this with the house fairly quiet. If there's any equipment you can turn off, like heating and air conditioning, turn that off. Any additional sounds. If you have a computer with a loud fan or whatever, turn that off if you can. So here is our first trace, and this is across the full frequency to 20,000 hertz. And we can see here that the Polk claim of 22 hertz is, according to this graph, is not really where the -3 dB point is. I would say that this is holding more steady elsewhere. So if we look at just the SPL here, and we apply a little smoothing. So if you go up to graph, let's just put this to variable smoothing to beginning. So this way it's doing less smoothing at the lower end, more smoothing at the higher end. We can see here it really doesn't steady out until past 50 hertz. And so the claim of 22, I don't think that's realistic. That's a accurate measurement. And we did stop the sweep at 20,000 hertz, so we didn't really get up to the 27, which the manufacturer claimed. But we can see that there's some peaks and some dips here, just happening naturally with the speaker without the room effects. So it'll be interesting to see this at different positions. Let's do it again, just to see if there's a consistency here. And what you want to do on each one of these traces is put a little note. So what we're going to do is say that this is the left near field, and this was 1 foot from tweeter. And that will be our first trace. So let's go and do this again just to see if it's repeatable. All right, so we're seeing our second trace. Same position, all the same settings. And you can see here, and we'll change the graph here to use the same variable smoothing. And we see some variance at the lower range. Let me just move this up so you can see it. But pretty much this is coming back with the same results, same, as expected. So let's try this in a different position. I'm going to move the microphone down now. And I'm going to do this a little bit more than a foot. This is going to be approximately 2 feet out. And I'm going to do it, let me get this, not right at the floor, but maybe about a foot up from the floor. And I'll note this microphone stand, if you can get one like this where you can really adjust not just the height, but the angle, and if you have to stretch across a couch when we do the main listening point or a chair, that's going to be very helpful there. So let's try this position. We're about 2 feet out and 1 foot high, centered on the speaker. So let's try this again. Oh, not to forget to do this a second time. I'll put the note in here. So this is the left. How did I do that? Left near field. 1 foot from tweeter. Second measurement. Well, let's do this again. Okay, so with this a little lower down, we're dropping off. Let me run the graph with the variable smoothing once again. And it really didn't affect the low frequency, bringing this a little bit down. We're coming up about the same measurement. It did affect the high frequency. So I'd like to try this one more time, but bringing the microphone down a bit. This time I'm going to do it close to the floor. So we're still about 2 feet off from the floor, but 1 inch high. So let's run this measurement again. And of course, I'm going to put the note here. So we're going to say that this is left, and it's near field, but it's 2 feet out and 1 foot high is that measurement. So let's run this again. And before I run this measurement, I'm actually going to check the levels one more time. All right, that's about 10 dBs left on the level, so I'm going to boost this up. Check it again. 74. 76, close enough. So let's run the sweep one more time. All right. And we will do our smoothing, variable smoothing. And, you know, interestingly, the position of the microphone near field, give or take a few feet up and down and out from the speaker, really isn't changing much. So this was, you know, you're doing a little experimenting. You're being scientific. You're learning the characteristics, not just the speaker of your but also your room, and learning how all these things together. So it's all right to experiment, try different things, and see where this gets you. But as interesting as we move things to the floor, we get a little different results. We're getting more of a boost close to the floor, around between 60 and 100, 110 kilohertz, or hertz, I should say. It's definitely louder there. Now let's try a little bit on the right-hand speaker to see if we're getting different results. I'm going to move the mic to the other speaker. Similarly, we're going to do 2 feet out. 1, 2. We're going to change now our output from left speaker to right speaker. We're going to check the levels. About the same. And now we'll start our sweep. And that is darn close for the same position. So that is what we're expecting, although there's a peak here at 176 hertz, which I can't really explain. And then we're going to do the same thing at 1 foot high. So let's do another measurement. That is pretty close to the other, so that positioning did not make much of a difference. We'll put the label on this. 2 feet out, 1 foot high. And then we'll do one last measurement. But first, reposition the microphone. So this time, we want about a foot out. A little lower. Check the level. Right on. So I'm going to run the sweep here. Let's compare that one, and I can deselect some of these other traces, left and right, and that is pretty darn close. And so what we're trying to see is we're learning a little bit about if we're doing these experiments correctly, doing our measurements correctly by comparing and seeing if we get repeatable results. If we get repeatable results, then we can say that we're learning how to use the tool with consistency. And I see that, although we see some variability, particularly in the low end, and then there's every once in a while some abnormal difference here, like at 415 hertz, we see this peak that we don't see on the left, on the other channel. So that is all interesting We can save this off. Enter any notes you wish to save with this group of measurements. So my note here is these are near field with the Polk LSI 15s. Save my measurement data, and I can put today's date of May 17th, and that this is the near field Polk LSI 15. In general, whether we're centered on the tweeter, we see around 44 hertz. It's starting to level off with the bass. And then if we move to look at some of the other measurements, about the same place where it's leveling off. So no matter where I'm measuring this, that leveling off is still occurring. It's interesting that it's almost like the bass gets amplified around 68 hertz over what the normal out. So it looks like these particular speakers have a characteristics where it's boosted in the bass after 60 hertz. And then we start to trail off a little bit after 7K. We could study these further. You're getting a sense how to use the tool, and that's really what this whole video is about, learning how to use the tool. Now we're going to try some from the main listening position. Okay, so this is the main listening position, and perhaps one of the ugliest couches, which I hope to replace. But this is what we got right now. And so what we want to do is get this microphone as close to my ear. Now I'm not sitting, I've got my, I'm a little off center right now, but my ear is where the center of my head would normally be. So I'm trying to position this microphone where my normal ear position is in the center of my head. And that's just about right. And so again, having this type of microphone stand is really convenient, because if you were trying to balance a tripod of any type directly on top of the couch, isn't going to be stable. So this gives us a nice stable position. If we want to do this right, we want to remember where this position is. And if I were to put a plumb from the ceiling and use the same length string every time, we could make sure we get to the same position. We're also going to try different positions off center to see how the room characteristics impact it positively or negative if we move a foot forward, a foot back, left and right of center, and we're going to test that out. So ideally you have an array of microphones so that you can get that consistency of the positioning. But we have one microphone right now, so we're just going to go about it this way. Now once again, I'm going to test the levels when I do my measurements. So we're going to do here, we're going to start with the right-hand speaker, go to the left speaker, then try them both. Let's do a check level. Generate it. And we'll raise it up. Turn the SPL meter on. Now, to me, that's louder, but to the microphone, it's the same. Now, the microphone is further away from the speaker, so that is necessary. So now we're ready to do our sweep. We'll hit measure and start. Check this out on the graph with the variable smoothing. Now I can turn off a lot of these other traces. Let's go with, some of the early ones. So the one we just did is the highlighted trace. Let's center this. And you can see that there's a more of a pronounced dip here at 150 hertz thereabout, and a more pronounced rise. So the dips and valleys are more pronounced here. And it tapers off on the high frequency as well. That is interesting. So it's comparing the near field versus the listener's position. So definitely have something going on in a few places that could be the room acoustics. Let's try the right-hand speaker this time, but we won't have to reposition the microphone. Now we'll try it for the left speaker. We'll switch the output to the left. We'll check our levels. And that's okay, and we'll start our sweep. Wow, so this one we have some pretty extreme suckouts here. Check this out here at 55 hertz. Definitely a subwoofer could probably help resolve that deviation. We're getting some of the peaks and valleys in the same places. But definitely the right-hand side is a little different. So let's mark this in the notes. Let's run another one. The last one we'll do here is going to do left plus right. We're going to check our levels. So that's a little high, so I'm going to drop that. That's close enough. Let's run our sweep. And see what the combine brings us. So we'll get rid of the early sweep. So the purple is the combined. Let's just first look at the combined purple versus, that's the combined versus the left channel, and the combined versus the right. Definitely looks better. But the main thing what I want to look at here, and because we're going to be, it's no sense in fine-tuning this now before we get the subs integrated. So this is just all very interesting. What I'm looking at is that 3 dB point where the subs are really required to pick up from the main speakers. And so definitely here around 40 hertz, it really becomes necessary, because that just drops like a rock after this. And if I take a look at some of the others, again, although this has that big dip here, that's around 40 hertz. Now, if I do a crossover point a little higher, that's probably not going to be such a bad deal. If I did around 80, I can get rid of this mess. So at this point, let's take a look at some of the sub performance. Let's do the same test with the subwoofers. Now, instead of running it through the processor this time, I'm going to plug the output from the digital interface directly into the subwoofer. And let's take a look here. So we're going to do this for sub calibration. It's interesting, they do this just from 30 to 80 hertz. Let's check the levels here. And Okay, that's reading about 90 dB, so we're going to make this a little less. Minus 30, maybe a little higher. And that's getting us about 75. So around 30, negative 36 dBs gets us at 75. We're just running one subwoofer. Now we'll go over to REW, and we're going to run another measurement. So as we said, the last time it was minus 36. So we want to make sure we mirror that at minus 36 dBs. We're going to check our level. So let's do our sweep. This time we're going to put this back to 20 to 20,000. Let's just do it the same as the other one. Let's see what this sub is capable of doing for a full range. And start. And here we go, and we're going to do the variable smoothing. And look at, we've got signal right there, even below 10 hertz. And we've got good strong levels up until about 80 hertz, and then it starts to dip off. Now this is without having those subs really placed or calibrated or anything, but really interesting. Let's see if this changes anything. If we run the measurements, this time say stop at 200 hertz and start at 20. So this one I didn't run full range. We just started at 20 hertz. Now look at this, that the subwoofer does well up until about 80 hertz. So this tells me that it's going to need the speaker above 80 hertz. Very interesting how much that drops off there. But look at how strong it is at 20 hertz. That's pretty amazing. This graph probably shows it the best. And running this down from 0 to 200 hertz with the subwoofer in its current position. This will change as I move it in different places of the room. But this suggests, in looking at it next to the graph of the Polk LSI 15s, that the range I'm working on that we probably want to cross this over at is somewhere not lower than 35 hertz, but not higher than 75. So the traditional 80 hertz, it appears like the subwoofer is not going to make it to 80 hertz, but it's going to do really good at low frequencies up until around 60. So I would say we might be doing a crossover around 60, but let's get through this exercise a little further. And we're going to be learning as we go here. And so this is just the first phase to kind of see where we're at. And as we go along the weeks here, we're going to try moving these subs into different places. We're going to try to use more of the tools, and then we're going to graduate up to Mini DSP and Drive Rack Live and see if those tools make a difference. So that does it for this first of our series. And as we go through this calibration process, I'd like to hear about what tools and techniques you're using to calibrate your subwoofers and to adjust for room effects. Let me know about those techniques you're using. Until then, if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and be sure to hit that bell notification so you'll be notified as soon as the next video is posted. Until then, keep evolving your audio experience.